My name is Elise Marrow. I'm 31 years old, and 2 weeks ago my father left 7 missed calls on my phone before breakfast. By the 8th call, I already knew something was wrong. Not because he cared about me, because in my family, nobody called that many times unless they needed something only I could give. 2 years ago, I was sitting in a chemo chair with a plastic bracelet around my wrist and a needle in my chest while my parents boarded a flight to my sister's wedding in Charleston. My mother sent me one text before takeoff. Try to understand. This is your sister's big day. I understood. I understood so clearly that I stopped asking them for anything after that. 6 rounds of chemo, 32 hospital visits, 3 emergency room nights. Not one parent in the waiting room, not one sister holding my hand, not one casserole on my doorstep. They were busy with flower walls, champagne towers, and a photographer my parents paid more than I made in 3 months. But here's the part they never expected me to find. While I was losing my hair and throwing up in a metal bowl, my parents were quietly signing away the only thing my grandmother had left in both our names. And 2 years later, when my sister's perfect life cracked open and they came looking for the dependable daughter again, they forgot one small detail. I had learned to read paperwork while I was learning to survive. Welcome back to Drama and Revenge Stories, where we tell stories about the people who stop begging to be chosen and finally choose themselves. If you've ever been treated like the backup plan in your own family, this one is for you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Now let me take you back to the winter. I learned that love and obligation are not the same thing. Before cancer, my life was quiet in the way I liked it. I worked as an administrative coordinator for a nonprofit clinic in Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. I handled schedules, patient grants, insurance letters, donation receipts, the boring little pieces of paper that decide whether someone gets help or gets told to wait. I was good at boring things. I was good at keeping lists. I was good at remembering birthdays, picking up prescriptions, filling out forms, checking expiration dates, and calling people back. In my family, that made me useful. Not loved. Useful. My younger sister, Sloane, was the beautiful one. The easy one. The daughter people leaned toward in photographs without realizing it. She cried loudly, laughed loudly, needed loudly. And every need she had became a family emergency. When Sloane wanted a private college, my parents refinanced the house. When I wanted community college, my father told me debt would teach me discipline. When Sloane needed a car, my mother said safety mattered. When mine broke down, my father gave me the number of a mechanic and said, "You're resourceful." That was the word they used for me. Resourceful. It sounds like a compliment until you realize it means no one is coming. My grandmother, June, was the only person who ever saw it clearly. She lived in a yellow house with green shutters and a porch swing that squeaked in the wind. Every Sunday when I was little, she made cinnamon toast and let me sit beside her while she balanced her checkbook. She used to tell me, "A woman should know what belongs to her, Elise. Not because she's greedy, because people get very comfortable taking from girls who don't ask questions." When she died, she left the yellow house to both me and Sloane. 50-50. My parents called it sentimental. Sloane called it old-fashioned. I called it the only place in the world where I had ever felt completely safe. For a while, nothing happened with it. My parents rented it out and said the money went into maintenance. I didn't question that. I was 26 when Grandma died, tired from work, tired from being the one who didn't make trouble. I trusted them. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was thinking a cancer diagnosis would make them remember I was their daughter. It started with a lump near my collarbone. I ignored it for 3 weeks because people like me are trained to ignore our own alarms. Then came the fever, the night sweats, the weight loss everyone complimented because people love a smaller woman even when she is disappearing for the wrong reasons. My doctor ordered blood work, then imaging, then a biopsy. By the time I sat across from the oncologist, I already knew the room had too many tissues in it. He said lymphoma. He said aggressive, but treatable. He said chemotherapy. I heard him, but I also heard my own heartbeat, loud and childish, like it belonged to someone younger than me. Someone who still believed her mother would come if she cried hard enough. I drove home and parked outside my apartment for almost an hour. Then I called my mom. She answered on the fourth ring, breathless and annoyed. Elise, can this be quick? We're at Sloane's final dress fitting. I looked down at the folder in my lap, the one with the word oncology printed on the front. I said, Mom, I have cancer. There was silence. For 1 second, I let myself believe that silence was shock. Then I heard Sloane laughing in the background. My mother lowered her voice and said, What do you mean? Cancer? I explained what I knew. I told her chemo started soon. I told her I was scared. I told her I didn't know how I was supposed to handle it alone. And my mother said the sentence that split my life in half. Please don't do this right now. Your sister's wedding is in 6 weeks. I didn't speak. She kept going. She's already overwhelmed. We all are. You know how emotional she gets? We'll talk after the wedding, okay? After the wedding. Like cancer was a package I could leave on the porch until the guests went home. I said, I start treatment before then. My mother sighed. Not cried. Not gasped. Sighed. Elise, you've always been strong. Sloane only gets 1 wedding. And there it was. 1 daughter got 1 wedding. The other got cancer and a reminder to be strong. I said, okay. That still embarrasses me. Not because I was weak, but because I sounded so normal while something inside me was quietly folding itself away. I hung up and stared at the steering wheel until the parking lot lights came on. A few days later, I called my father. I thought maybe my mother had softened it when she told him. Maybe he hadn't understood. Maybe fathers are different when they hear their child say the word cancer out loud. He listened quietly. Then he cleared his throat and said, Your mother is under a lot of pressure right now. Don't make her choose. That was how he saw it, not as a daughter needing her parents, as a choice between a sick child and a pretty wedding. And I had already lost. Chemo started on a Thursday morning. The infusion center smelled like sanitizer and warm blankets. Every chair had a little table beside it. Every table had water cups, crackers, tissues, and the kind of magazines nobody reads unless they're trying not to cry. I came alone. The nurse asked who was driving me home. I lied and said a friend was coming. She looked at me for a second too long, then nodded like nurses do when they know the truth, but let you keep your dignity. The first bag was red. I remember that most. Red medicine entering my body like a warning. Around me, people had husbands, wives, daughters, sons. Someone's boyfriend was rubbing their feet. Someone's mother was peeling an orange. Someone's sister had brought a blanket from home. I had my phone face down in my lap and 1 text from my mother. Your father and I leave Friday for Charleston. We'll check in when we can. They did check in. Once. From the rehearsal dinner. My mother sent a photo of Sloane standing under white lights with her veil in her hair. Isn't she glowing? I was sitting on my bathroom floor when it came through, sweating through my shirt, my scalp already tender, my stomach twisting itself into knots. I typed, beautiful. Then I put the phone under a towel so I wouldn't have to see it light up again. The wedding weekend became a gallery of everything I was not invited to matter during. My father walking Sloane down the aisle. My mother crying into lace. My sister kissing her new husband, Callum, under a chandelier. A caption from my aunt, the perfect family day. Perfect family. I looked at that picture for a long time. My parents stood on either side of Sloane, their hands on her arms, their faces full of pride. No one looking like they had left a daughter in Ohio with poison in her veins. No one looking ashamed. That was the weekend I stopped expecting them to surprise me. The months that followed were not dramatic in the way movies make illness dramatic. There was no soft music, no beautiful montage, no family gathering around my bed with apologies and soup. There was laundry I couldn't lift. There were bills I opened with shaking hands. There were mornings when my bones hurt so badly I cried before my feet touched the floor. There were clumps of hair in the shower drain. There was my reflection, pale and strange, like a woman I had been asked to take care of but didn't know very well. My landlord fixed a leak over my kitchen sink before my mother ever asked if I had groceries. A coworker named Priya drove me home after my 3rd infusion because she found out I'd been taking ride shares and got furious in the quiet way. Good people get furious. You don't have to earn help, she told me, buckling my seatbelt because my hands were trembling too hard to do it myself. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. In my family, help always came with a receipt. Priya never asked for one. She brought lentil soup in glass containers. She sat on my couch and watched terrible cooking shows with me. She shaved the last patchy pieces of my hair when I couldn't stand looking at them anymore, and she cried only after I did, which is a kindness people don't talk about enough. She never made my sickness about her. My family did the opposite. When Sloan finally called, 3 months into treatment, she talked for 17 minutes about how hard marriage was, the thank you notes, the delayed honeymoon, Callum's mother being difficult. Then she said, "Mom told me you're still doing chemo." Still. Like I was dragging it out. I said yes. She went quiet, then said, I feel bad, obviously. But I just couldn't have that energy around the wedding, you know? That energy. My cancer had become a bad mood she didn't want near her flowers. I told her I understood. By then, I had become very good at saying things I no longer meant. The real break came in April. I was between cycles, weak but upright, when a letter arrived from the county recorder's office. It was addressed to me, which was strange because nothing about my grandmother's house had come to me in years. Inside was a notice about a recorded transfer. I read it standing in my kitchen. Then I sat down slowly. The yellow house had been transferred. Not sold. Transferred. My 50% interest, the part my grandmother had left me, was gone. According to the document, I had signed a quitclaim deed giving my share to Sloan 6 months earlier. Except I hadn't. I stared at the signature line until the room narrowed. My name was there. Elise Marrow. Looped and tilted, almost like mine, but not mine. Not even close if you knew where to look. I knew exactly what had happened before anyone admitted it. My parents had told me months earlier there were tax papers for Grandma's property that needed signing. My father had brought them to my apartment during my second cycle. I was feverish. He stood in my doorway with a clipboard and said it was routine, that the rental account needed updating, that I didn't have to read everything because he'd already checked it. I signed where he pointed. I trusted my father while chemo was burning through me, and he used that trust to move my inheritance to my sister. I called him with the paper in my hand. He answered calmly. Too calmly. I asked him what I had signed. He said, "Don't get worked up." That was the first confession. People only tell you not to get worked up when they know they have done something worth getting worked up about. He explained it like I was slow. Sloan and Callum wanted to renovate the yellow house and turn it into a bed and breakfast. My parents thought it made sense for the property to be in one name. Sloan had the vision. Sloan had a husband. Sloan had a future family. And you, my father said carefully, you have enough on your plate. There it was again. My illness being used as the reason to take from me. Not help me. Take from me. I said, "You had me sign away my half while I was in chemo." He said, "We didn't want to burden you with details." Details. My grandmother's house was a detail. My signature was a detail. My trust was a detail. I asked if Sloan knew. He didn't answer fast enough. That told me everything. When my mother came on the line, she sounded irritated, like I had interrupted dinner. "Elise, the house would have been too much for you. Your sister is settled. She can do something beautiful with it." I said, "Grandma left it to both of us." My mother's voice hardened. "Your grandmother didn't understand how life would turn out. No, she understood perfectly. That was why she put my name on it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to their house and throw the paper on the table. I wanted to call every relative and tell them the perfect family had stolen from the sick daughter while she was too weak to stand straight. But chemo does something strange to your pride. It teaches you what energy costs. And that day, I did not have enough energy to waste on people committed to misunderstanding me. So I did what I had learned to do at work. I made copies. I scanned everything. The notice. The deed. The signature page. The date. The notary. I put it all in a folder labeled Yellow House. Then I called an attorney. Not to start a war. Not yet. Just to understand the battlefield. Her name was Marin Holt, and she had the voice of a woman who had heard every family lie at least twice. She reviewed the documents and told me what I already knew in my bones. "This is ugly," she said, "but not impossible." She explained undue influence, capacity concerns, fraud, notary issues, deadlines, costs. The way family property fights can swallow years and savings and mental health. Then she said something I never forgot. You can sue now, or you can document everything and wait until they need something from you. People who take shortcuts usually build their own trap. You don't always have to push them into it. I asked her what she meant. She said, if your sister used that property as collateral, business asset, marital asset, anything like that, your claim may matter later, especially if things go wrong. Things always go wrong when people build on stolen ground. I kept the folder. I finished chemo. That sounds simple when I say it quickly. It wasn't. The last infusion left me so weak, Priya had to help me from the car to my apartment. My mouth tasted like metal. My hands went numb at the fingertips. I couldn't remember words sometimes. I had medical debt stacked in a blue plastic bin beside my desk and a body that felt like it had been taken apart and put back together by someone in a hurry. But I was alive. 3 months later, my scan was clear. The oncologist said remission, and I cried so hard he handed me the whole tissue box. Not because everything was fixed, because I had made it to a day my parents had not helped me reach. When I told my mother, she sent a heart emoji. 1 red heart. Then, 10 minutes later, a picture of the yellow house with new shutters. Sloan and Callum had started renovations. Looks beautiful, doesn't it? I didn't answer. That was the beginning of my silence. Not a dramatic silence. Not blocking everyone. Not shouting about boundaries online. Just less. Less answering. Less explaining. Less showing up. Less pretending the family group chat was a place where I belonged. I focused on healing. I took short walks until they became long walks. I paid down the smallest medical bill first just to feel one victory. I went to therapy with a woman who did not let me call theft complicated family stuff. I also started learning property records, civil filings, small business liens, deeds of trust, loan documents. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I was done being the only person in the room who didn't know what had been done to me. And every few months, I checked the records on the yellow house. At first, it was just renovation permits, then a business registration, then a commercial loan, then a second loan, then a lien from a contractor. I watched from a distance as Sloan and Callum turned my grandmother's house into the Juniper Room, a boutique bed and breakfast with cream walls, brass lamps, and expensive weekend rates. They named it after Grandma June. That part almost made me laugh. They stole her gift from me, then used her name to sell breakfast to strangers. My mother posted every update. So proud of our Sloan. Our girl had a dream and made it real. Family legacy restored. Legacy. That word landed differently when you knew whose signature had been copied into it. 2 years passed. My hair grew back thicker and darker. My body stopped feeling like a stranger's. Priya became more than a coworker. She became the person who had a key to my apartment, the person who knew my scan dates, the person who showed up with soup before I knew I needed soup. My real life got smaller and stronger. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. I stopped being the emergency contact for people who were never mine. And eventually, I could think about my parents without feeling like someone had pressed a thumb into a bruise. Then the calls started. 7 missed calls from Dad, 2 from Mom, 1 from Sloan. That was how I knew the trap had finally closed. I let the phone ring until I finished making coffee. That may sound petty to someone who has always been loved properly. To me, it felt like freedom. When I finally called my father back, he answered before the first ring ended. "Elise," he said, and his voice was not calm this time. Sloane's husband had left. Not temporarily. Left. Callum had drained the business account, taken one of the cars, and moved into a condo with the woman who had handled their social media marketing. The bed and breakfast was behind on payments. A contractor was threatening legal action. The bank was asking questions. Sloan was having panic attacks and had not gotten out of bed in 3 days. My father talked for 5 minutes before he remembered to ask how I was. Actually, he didn't ask. He said, "You're doing better now, right?" Now. As if my survival had matured into usefulness. I said, "What do you need?" The question came out flat. He didn't notice. "We need you to come to the house tonight," he said. "Your sister needs family." The yellow house. He still called it the house. Not my grandmother's house. Not the house they took from me. Just the house. I asked why. My father took a breath. "The business paperwork is a mess. You're good with forms. And you know, Grants, clinics, hardship programs, legal aid, that kind of thing. We need someone clear-headed. Clear-headed. That was the new word for resourceful. My mother got on the phone then. She was crying. Elise, please. Sloan is falling apart. She could lose everything. Everything. I looked across my apartment at the blue folder on my bookshelf, Yellow House. I said, that must be scary. My mother sniffed. It is. And after everything your sister has been through, she can't handle this alone. After everything. I waited. I wanted to see if she would hear herself. She didn't. She needs you, my mother said. We all do. And there it was. The sentence I had known was coming since the day I scanned the deed. They needed me. Not when I was sick. Not when I was scared. Not when I was lying on a bathroom floor with a fever and a towel under my head. They needed me when the daughter they chose finally became expensive. I said I would come. Not because I planned to save them. Because some truths deserve witnesses. That evening, I drove to the Yellow House for the first time in years. Sloan had painted the front door black. Grandma's porch swing was gone, replaced by 2 expensive chairs nobody looked comfortable sitting in. There were little lanterns along the walkway and a wooden sign near the steps. The Juniper Room. I sat in my car for a moment with both hands on the wheel. I remembered Grandma handing me cinnamon toast on that porch. I remembered her saying a woman should know what belongs to her. Then I picked up the folder from the passenger seat and walked inside. The house smelled like lemon polish and fear. My parents were in the dining room. Sloan was wrapped in a cashmere blanket at the table, pale and furious, her wedding ring still on her finger like a dare. My Aunt Marla was there too, because every family like mine has an aunt who appears when guilt needs a microphone. She hugged me too tightly and whispered, "Now is not the time to hold grudges." I almost smiled. People only call it a grudge when they don't want to discuss the receipt. Sloan looked up at me with swollen eyes. For a second, I saw the little girl she had been. The one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The one I had loved before my parents taught her that my sacrifices were natural. Then she opened her mouth. "I know things have been weird," she said. "But I need you to be my sister right now." Weird. That was what she called theft. That was what she called abandonment. Weird. My father cleared his throat and started explaining the situation like he was chairing a meeting. The bank wanted updated financials. There were unpaid invoices. Callum's name was on some accounts, but not others. Sloan had no idea what she had signed. The business loan was tied to the property. The contractor's lien had to be answered. Then my mother said the part they had gathered me there to hear. "We think you should take over the paperwork for a while." I looked at her. "What does that mean?" "It means help your sister," Aunt Marla snapped. "Don't make this ugly." But my father was more practical. "We need you to contact the bank, organize the documents, maybe speak to an attorney, see if there are hardship options. You work with complicated systems. You understand these things. And," my mother added softly, "if you could stay here a few nights a week until Sloan is steady, that would be best." There it was, the old shape. My time, my labor, my calm, my life. All of it placed on the table like a family asset. Sloan started crying then. Not quietly. Sloan never cried quietly. "I'm going to lose Grandma's house," she said. Grandma's house. For the first time that night, I felt something hot move through me. Not rage. Recognition. I set my folder on the dining table. The same table where Grandma had taught me how to count change from a grocery envelope. The room went still. My mother's eyes moved to the folder. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. I opened it slowly. "Before I help with any paperwork," I said, "we should talk about the first piece of paperwork." My father's face changed. Sloan frowned. Aunt Marla crossed her arms. I pulled out the quitclaim deed and placed it in the center of the table. "This is the document transferring my half of this house to Sloan." Nobody spoke. I turned the page. "This is my signature," my mother whispered. "Elise." I kept going. I signed papers during chemo because Dad told me they were routine tax documents. I was sick, medicated, and exhausted. I was not told I was giving away my inheritance. I was not told Sloan was getting full ownership. I was not told this house would be used for a business, loans, or collateral. Sloan's face went red. "You're really doing this now?" I looked at her. Yes. Now seems to be when paperwork matters to everyone. My father put both hands on the table. We did what made sense at the time. I nodded. That's what I'm explaining. You did what made sense for Sloan. My mother started crying, but softer than Sloan. More practiced. We didn't want to stress you. You were already dealing with so much. I looked at her for a long moment. You skipped my chemo for a wedding. The words were not loud. That made them worse. The room absorbed them. My Aunt Marla looked away first. I continued. You didn't avoid stressing me. You avoided informing me. Sloan pushed back from the table. I didn't force you to sign anything. No, I said. You just accepted what they took. She stood. You've always acted like I stole your life just because Mom and Dad helped me. I almost laughed then. Not because it was funny. Because even now, standing inside a business built on my grandmother's stolen gift, she still believed help was something that naturally belonged to her. Sloan, I said, you didn't steal my life. You just got very comfortable living in the parts of it they handed you. My father slammed his hand on the table. That is enough. For most of my life, that sound would have ended me. I would have apologized, smoothed things over, said I didn't mean it like that, offered to make coffee. But I had survived worse than my father's anger. I had survived red medicine in a clear tube. I had survived the empty chair beside me. I had survived my own mother choosing centerpieces over oncology. So I looked at him and said, no, it isn't. The silence after that was so complete I could hear the old house settling around us. I pulled out the second stack of papers, property records, loan filings, the contractor lien, business registration, dates, amounts, names. You asked me here because I'm good with forms, I said. So I read them. My father went pale. The business loan is secured against this property. The contractor lien is attached to this property. Callum's name is on the operating account, but Sloan signed the loan guarantee. If this goes into default, the bank doesn't care that he cheated. They care whose name is on the papers. Sloan sat down slowly. For the first time, she looked less angry than afraid. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the chemo chair. I remembered the red bag. I remembered my mother's text. Try to understand. I did understand. That was the problem. My father said, so help us fix it. Us. That word came so easily when the bill arrived. My mother reached across the table for my hand. I moved mine before she touched it. Elise, please, she said. Whatever mistakes were made, we are still family. There was the old card. Family. The word they locked away when I needed care and pulled out when they needed labor. I looked at each of them. My father, who had used my illness as cover. My mother, who had called my survival bad timing. My sister, who had accepted a house and called the fallout weird. My aunt, who had come prepared to shame me into service. Then I closed the folder. I'm not taking over the paperwork. Sloan's mouth opened. I kept my voice calm. I'm not staying here a few nights a week. I'm not calling the bank for you. I'm not cleaning up documents I was tricked into signing. And I'm not donating my life to a family that treated my illness like an inconvenience. My mother began sobbing. But she needs you. Those 3 words should have hurt. They didn't. They landed in me and found no place to stick. 2 years earlier, I had needed them in the raw, humiliating way a sick person needs someone to drive, to sit, to answer the phone, to remember that she is not just a diagnosis in a chair. They had taught me what their help was worth. Now I was simply respecting the price. I stood and picked up my folder. My father's voice sharpened. Elise, don't walk out of here. Your sister could lose this house. I looked around at the black door, the brass lamps, the polished floors, the pretty sign outside with my grandmother's name on it. Then I said the truest thing I had said in years. She already lost it the day she accepted it like I didn't exist. Sloan cried harder. Aunt Marla snapped, "How can you be so cold?" That one almost made me smile. Cold. They always call you cold when they can no longer keep you warm enough to use. I turned to my mother. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Frightened. For 1 second, The daughter in me reached for her. The old daughter. The one who wanted one apology badly enough to accept crumbs and call them dinner. Then my mother said, "After all we did for you." And the reaching stopped. Because what had they done? They raised me to be useful. They taught me to disappear. They skipped the room where I fought for my life and danced in the room where my sister started hers. I looked at her and answered with the same sentence she had given me when I was sick. "Please don't do this right now." Her face changed like I had slapped her. I didn't raise my voice. "Your daughter's crisis is not my responsibility." Then I walked out. No slammed door. No screaming. No final speech on the porch. Just my shoes on Grandma's polished floor, my hand on the black front door, and the evening air hitting my face like I had stepped out of a room that had been short of oxygen for 31 years. My father followed me outside. "Elise," he called. I stopped beside my car. He looked angry, but underneath it, he looked scared. Good. Not because I wanted him to suffer, because fear was the first honest emotion I had seen from him all night. "We made mistakes," he said. Mistakes. Not choices. Not lies. Not theft. Mistakes. I said, "Then you can make repairs." He stared at me. "I want my half restored legally," I said. "Or I want the value of it acknowledged in writing as a debt. Marin Holt is my attorney. She already has copies of everything." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. That was the first time in my life my father had no instruction ready for me. I got into my car. Before I closed the door, he said, "You'd really take your own family to court?" I looked at him through the open window. "No," I said. "I'm letting my attorney talk to the people who took property from a cancer patient." Then I drove away from the yellow house, past the sign with my grandmother's name on it, past the porch where the swing should have been, past the family that had mistaken my silence for consent. I did not cry until I got home. And when I did, Priya was waiting on my couch with soup. Not because I had asked, because she knew. That is the difference. Here is how it ended, because I know you want the part where consequences finally knock. 2 weeks after that dinner, my attorney sent the letter. Clean. Professional. Sharp enough to cut. It challenged the transfer. It questioned the circumstances under which I signed. It requested preservation of all documents related to the property, the business loans, the renovation funding, and communications about my ownership interest. Suddenly, everyone remembered my number. My mother called crying. My father called angry. Sloan sent a text that said, "I hope you're happy." I was not happy. That's what people like them never understand. Justice does not always feel like joy. Sometimes it feels like finally putting down something heavy and realizing your arms are shaking. Marin handled everything after that. The bank got nervous when the ownership dispute surfaced. The contractor got louder. Callum, who had apparently assumed the house was clean marital property, hired his own lawyer. Sloan learned very quickly that being handed something and owning it peacefully are not the same thing. In the end, they settled. Not because they became better people, because the paperwork made pretending expensive. Sloan refinanced with my parents' help and paid me the appraised value of my half, minus some negotiated costs I did not have the energy to fight over. It was still more money than I had ever seen at one time. Enough to pay off every medical bill, enough to rebuild my savings, enough to put a down payment on a small townhouse with a maple tree in front and no family memories hiding in the walls. The Juniper Room closed 6 months later. My mother posted nothing about that. Funny how silence becomes acceptable when the golden child is the one standing in it. Sloan and I do not speak now. Maybe one day we will. Maybe we won't. I no longer confuse peace with reunion. My parents send messages on holidays. I answer when I want to, not when guilt tells me to. My father has never apologized for the clipboard. My mother has never apologized for Charleston. They prefer soft words like complicated, difficult, stressful, unfortunate. But I know the real words. They chose. They signed. They left. And I survived. That is the sentence I come back to when old guilt tries to make itself sound like love. I survived. Without them. Not because I was strong in the way they meant it. Not strong like available. Not strong like quiet. Not strong like easy to use. Strong like a woman who learned the difference between being needed and being valued. Strong like a woman who stopped mistaking abandonment for a test she had to pass. Strong like a woman who finally read the fine print. Priya helped me move into the townhouse in spring. The first thing I bought was a porch swing, not because it was grandma's, because it was mine. On the first warm evening, I sat there with a blanket over my knees, a mug of tea in my hands, and no phone buzzing with someone else's emergency. For a long time, I listened to the maple leaves move in the wind, and I thought about the yellow house, about the chemo chair, about my mother's text. Try to understand. I do understand now. I understand that some families don't abandon you all at once. They do it in small, ordinary ways and expect you to keep calling it love. I understand that being the strong one can become a cage if everyone else gets to be fragile at your expense. I understand that paperwork remembers what people deny. And I understand that sometimes revenge is not ruining anyone. Sometimes revenge is just refusing to rescue them from the consequences they created while you were busy rescuing yourself. So if you are the dependable one, the resourceful one, the one everyone calls when something breaks but nobody sits beside when you do, listen to me. You are not a family emergency kit. You are not free labor with a heartbeat. You are not required to prove your love by bleeding quietly. Love shows up before it needs something. Remember that. My parents skipped my chemo for my sister's wedding. 2 years later, she needed me. And for the first time in my life, I let her need someone else. That's my story. A wedding, a chemo chair, a stolen house, and a folder full of facts they thought I'd be too weak to read. If this reminded you that being useful is not the same as being loved, take it as your sign to protect your peace today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.